You are a magical being, a person who is going through and actually utilizing skills that no one in this world has except for you, the way that you do it. And then you're creating an object. That object is a magic item. It's not a generic, it's not a spoon. It's not something that you can buy on Amazon. It is truly magical. And the price should reflect that.
I'm Candace Giardardi. This is Gratitude Geek. Today we are chatting with Paul Pape, a creative business strategist who's designed collectibles for Disney and Universal. And now he helps artists price their work. We are talking about pricing, y'all. I know it's not your favorite subject, but we're talking about it. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you for having me, Candace. I appreciate it.
So how'd you land the gig with Disney?
Landed quite a few jobs with Disney. And honestly, it's a roundabout way. I like to tell people that my journey through life is never been a straight line. It's more like a bowl of spaghetti. It just goes wherever it wants. And so I was actually assisting on a theatrical show with a designer, and he got picked up to design a live show for Disney World called Bear in the Big Blue House. And then from there, I was brought on as his assistant. I started building models and stuff for them there. And then occasionally they would just kind of pop back into my life and be like, hey, we need this. Hey, we need that. And that's really how I got into working specifically with Disney.
Bear in the Big Blue House. That show was watched often in my house.
I love that show.
Oh, that was a while ago. So you've had a couple of decades with Disney.
I have.
And
Yeah.
I know this conversation is supposed to be about pricing, but I want to talk about how Disney has changed over the last 20, 30 years.
Honestly, I'd say the last 5 years, I've seen the most dramatic shift in there. Now, when I first started working with them, with Bear in the Big Blue House, I was developing my very first product. And there's this mythos of Disney that if you know enough about Disney, you'll know this is to be true, is that when you work for Disney, you are contractually obligated that anything that you come up with, ideas-wise, is theirs. That's because they've got Imagineering going on there. So there's a great story about Tim Burton in Nightmare Before Christmas. He actually developed that while he was a in-betweener working on Fox and the Hound. And he had come up with this idea, but Disney owned it. And it took him another 20 years to be able to fight his way to get it back. And so that's actually built into theirs because they've got a lot of innovation happening at Disney. And so when I was working on Bear in the Big Blue House, I was developing a product line that I had started before I started working for them, but I had to make sure that it was a clause in the contract that says, you do not own this. This is something that I've come up independently, and it doesn't really tread on the same territory. That was fine. Now, cut to about, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, I was doing a job for them for a promotional, a movie called The Creator, which is about androids and stuff. And I was building these pieces for them, and they sent me the same contract. And I was reading through it, and I'm like, oh, just so you know, I'm an independent contractor. I develop new product all the time, whatever. I would like this clause back in there. They said no. They said hard no. And I was like, well, that's really weird. And they're like, you also need to sign the influencer clause, which was new. And what that said is that they own your likeness as well. And I'm like, I'm not here to show my face. I'm here to give you a pair of headphones is what I was working on for them. I'm like, you don't own my likeness. And not only your likeness, but they own your social media handles. They own all of it because while you're there. And so I don't know if you remember the writer's strike from a few years ago, but that was in the actor's strike. That was what that was about. It was digital acquisition because a lot of, extras in movies, they get hired once and 3D scanned. And then to work with Disney, you sign off that they own that likeness and can use it in perpetuity without paying you. And so when I fought back and forth, and I had my lawyers talking to their lawyers, and eventually, whenever I work for anybody, it's always on a very tight deadline. And so typically they're like, sign the contract, hit the ground running. You've got 2 weeks or whatever to create 1 million pieces or whatever. And so I'm like, okay. So I was in the middle of working on it. And then they're like, if you ask us any more questions or try to deny this, you have to pay us back everything that we've already given you. And I was already neck deep into the project, and we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. And I was like, I guess I'm going to sign it. Now, fortunately from there, I was able to lawyer up, speak more with my lawyer, get through it. And then we actually had them negate that clause after the fact. But that's been the biggest change for me is that, and a lot of people, and I know we're supposed to be talking about pricing, but this comes into pricing.
This has to do with pricing. It does.
Read your contracts and understand your contracts. And if you do not understand your contract, use ChatGPT, use something and say, explain this like I'm a toddler. What does this say? Because a lot of people just get and I did too when they're like, Bear in the Big Blue House, they're like, you want to work for Disney? And I was just, big starstruck guy. I'm like, Disney's a huge company. Of course I want to work for this company. But I've been burned before by contracts. So I was like, no, I'm going to read it anyways. And I find those little clauses. But I know so many people who just sign off and they don't really read what they're getting into. And we're inundated by contracts constantly with like EULAs from every device and software that we own. And we're just like, I just want to use it, click yes, sure, whatever. We never read what we're giving away. But when you're dealing with contracts, especially money, because then it comes into iteration, they may be and any contract coming from another company is always in their favor, never in yours.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're reading it, because iteration becomes one of the hardest ones, because this is your flat fee. And then it'll say it can be iterated until they're happy with it. Well, that could be 10, 15, 20 times the amount of work that you were charging for, because they want to constantly iterate. So I always have to make sure that the iteration clause is in there saying that you get 2 iterations on this fee or whatever we negotiate. And then any after that is an additional fee. And those are things that you can negotiate as far as your contract goes, but make sure you read it.
What you're talking about is so beyond what most people who are just starting a business are thinking
Correct.
about. That
Yep.
you have the benefit of having experience dealing with all this, but a lot of folks, they start a business and they think, oh, I'm an artist, I love to draw, right? I'm not
Yep.
an artist, I don't love to draw, but I'm an artist, I love to draw, and I want to sell my art. And how
Mhm.
hard can that be? Well, turns out it's a lot harder than you think it is.
It is,
you
absolutely,
know
100%. And I think that's really what you want to talk about today is, how do we figure that out? Like, how do we figure that out? And there's 2 different trains of thought here. And one of them is the beginner's thought. And then the other one is if this is something you truly want to pursue. So I'd like to start with the beginning, if you don't mind,
No, sure.
to start with the beginning one. So if you've gotten to a
Less
point
work
where
for
you're,
me. If you do all the
yeah,
talking, I don't have to do any asking.
there you go. So when you're first starting out as an artist and you typically start it's a hobby, you're like, oh, and then you get good at it, or enough people have told you should really be selling this. And you're like, okay, I'm going to start selling this. And then you're like, now what? And then you go online, you do some research, you go on Etsy or Amazon and you find out what they're charging for the prices. And you're like, that's what I'm going to charge for mine. Well, there's 2 things working against you here. One, Amazon can sell stuff for cheaper than you can ever make it. And then 2, the people that you find that are artists that are still doing it and are earning money, they've earned reputation. So until we know who you are, you can't charge those prices. I learned that one the really hard way. My skill level was there, but nobody knew who I was. So saying I'd charge them this much amount for something, they're like, no, that's not going to work. And so I had to end up lowering my price on that. So here's what I tell people when they're just starting out. If you've gotten to the point where your hobby is something that you want to sell, then think of yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 to 4 is your learning process. Okay. So you're not getting paid for that. When you hit number 5, that should be where you're like, I'm going to start getting paid. That number, the amount you should earn, is at least minimum wage hourly for the area that you live. Why this is important is because if you want to sell something, you want to sell it in a way that it is going to actually pay for itself and pay you a livable wage, or a wage that is accessible.
A
If you're
minimum wage is
charging,
not livable.
I know, but
Okay.
but
I get it.
a rate that is, because otherwise you can just go get a minimum wage job.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. And I mean, that's the idea. And then what happens is over time, you become more efficient and better at your job. And when you do that, you start to double your rate. And I know that sounds extreme. So like if you're charging, say, $15 an hour at 5, at level 6, you want to be charging $30 an hour. And then at level 7, we're charging $120 an hour. Or $60 an hour, then 120. It doubles. And the reason that I say that, and people are like, I can't imagine charging someone $120 an hour. I'm like, I charge $600 an hour. I have like lawyer rates. But the thing is, I'm so fast at my job. That's the part we don't talk about. Is the more efficient you become at something, the quicker it should be for you. You've learned shortcuts. You've learned your process really, really fast. So why should slower, dumber you from the past, who's taking more hours to complete the job, earn more money hourly than fast, more efficient you in the future? It shouldn't. It should at least balance out. Technically, you should be earning more the longer you've been doing something. And so that's why we double the rate. So that's the first thing that I say is like, know where you're at on your scale, figure out what you need to charge. The second one is actually a book that I literally, this is hot off the presses. This is my preview copy. It's called Not for Resale. No, the book is actually called Quit Selling Your Shit. And I know that it's brash on purpose. I want you to see the title and be like, oh, I'm curious. The subtitle is Why Product First Selling is Killing Your Creative Business. And that's really the important part, because product first selling is going to be the death knell for every creative that's out there, because we cannot compete with places like Amazon. I don't know how many trade shows I've been to or how many art festivals that I've been to where somebody's like, my kid could do that, or I could buy that on Amazon for X amount or whatever. And that's the expression that every single one of us has to have, with that heavy sigh of like, no, I'm pouring my blood, sweat, and tears in this. The thing is, it's a mind shift is really what it is for me as the artist. And then once I believe myself in that, then it exudes from you, and your clients or the customers feel it. They won't ask. I rarely get anybody haggling anymore. Granted, I've been at this for 20 years. So what this means is that quit selling your stuff. Don't try to sell me an object. Like here, I was showing you earlier, I got this custom carbonite. I could be like, hey, buy my custom carbonite. And if you're on the internet, you see people saying, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. Nobody cares. Like, this is made of plastic. It's hollow. Yeah, I sculpted it and whatever. It's printed, but it's about 2 millimeters thick. If I weighed the material on this, it might be worth about $40. Okay, sure. If this was mass produced, it wouldn't be you, it would be somebody else. But if it was mass produced, you might be able to get it for $25, maybe $40, $50 at this size. The thing is as an artist, as the creative behind it, I need more than that to make that worth my while. I sell these for $400. Now, what's the difference in that? It's me. I'm selling the product. I'm a wizard magically creating things that do not exist. As a creative, so are you. You are a magical being, a person who is going through and actually utilizing skills that no one in this world has, except for you, the way that you do it. And then you're creating an object. That object is a magic item. It's not a generic, it's not a spoon. It's not something that you can buy on Amazon. It is truly magical, and the price should reflect that. And that's really what this book talks about. It's about getting you into the right mindset to be able to think about how to view yourself as a magical entity, and that your work is worth that, because it all comes down to worth. It's never about materials. It's always about what you do with them. And I've had clients in the past, or customers in the past, who are like, hey, I need this thing made out of clay. And I'm like, okay, it's like $500-$600. And they're like, well, I think it's only worth about $90. I'm like, I'll give you the $90 one. I'll ship it out today. And they're like, well, how can you do that? Because I'm going to give you the clay and I'll send it to you for $90. They're like, well, but I want the thing. And I'm like, well, that's the skill, and that's what you're paying for. That's the magic.
Yep.
And so really, when it comes to pricing for things like that, you've got to really take that into consideration. That's why there are artists in gallery. But when you go to the gallery, you're not going, I've got a great art museum here in my town, and they've got this beautiful thing on there, and it's not called Lots of Flowers. It's called Monet's Lily Pads. Monet. You're there for Monet. You're not there for flowers. I mean, the flowers are pretty, and that's what we want to see. And so that's really the mindset. Or when you see somebody walking down the red carpet, they're never yelling, what are you wearing? And they're like, pants. No, they're like, who are you wearing? Right. So that's the idea behind it, is you want to be the wizard that people, mention your name in the shadows. That's the great thing about it, is like, you are special, you're magical, and that's what you should be pivoting your price on. Now, you have to earn that reputation, and that's what we talk about in the first one. So when you first start out, you can't be charging astronomical amounts, because you're not a wizard, you're an apprentice. And you're getting there, you're learning it. And it's when you are able to finally say, when somebody can look at my work and go, that's a Paul Pape piece. That's a tongue twister. Then, that's something I'm like, okay, when Disney calls me, or when Nickelodeon calls me, they're not calling random prop guy. There's like, Paul can do this. I did a job with the Tonight Show just the other day, and they're like, we have this weird idea. We can't figure out how to do it. The writer room is like, just call that guy in Nebraska. And so they're like, can you make this random thing? And then when I'm saying random, it's random. I wish I could say what it is, but NDAs and all that fun stuff, but way random. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then I did that. And then the next week they're like, we have something, and on the spectrum, clear on the other end. If one thing is like carving marble, this one is making soft soap. Like, it's completely different. And they're like, can you do that? Like, yes, I can. They're not hiring me for the thing. They're hiring Paul, because Paul knows how to do the magic.
Okay, so but the Tonight Show, they want fast turnaround. I mean, because they come up with these ideas the morning of.
Correct.
So how are you doing that?
Usually you get 24 to 48 hours. So they have an idea. So the writer room, usually they're working for the next week. And so they'll come up with some ideas, and then the writer room, and they're literally...
How is that even possible in 2026 to work for next week when things happen every day?
Well, because usually the bits that they're working on are long enough lasting that they, that they'll be there. If if they've got a person coming on to promote a movie that's coming out, they may have preview access to information.
Yeah.
I've done some political themed stuff. And obviously that's forefront right now for all of us. And they'll call up with that. And that usually is, we need it tomorrow morning. One of them was, this is first term doing Oscars, but they were Trumpskers. And they called me up and they're like, we need 6 of these for a fake Oscar ceremony that he's going to give himself all the awards for, but we need them tomorrow. They called me at 4 p.m. and they're like, we need it in hand by 6 p.m. the next day.
And you're in Nebraska.
Yeah. So thank God for FedEx. That's all I got to say. So, but that was literally an overnight job for me. I worked and I didn't sleep that night at all, but that's okay because that's the job. And they understand when they put you on like that, when they demand you drop everything and work for them, they compensate well for that. So it's not a problem.
Well, I want to come back to that because that is pricing related. One of my least favorite facts about art is that if you hire an interior designer, they are buying artwork to fit in a space for you. They are not buying artwork. Do you know this? They are not buying artwork that you love. They are buying artwork on your behalf that matches the decor in the room. I know. And so when you're looking at pieces like that, there's no emotional attachment. But when you can attach emotion to art, that also affects pricing.
Yes. First off, I could never have someone decorate my house that I had no emotional connection to. That would be I would feel like I was living in a museum. I mean, I know for some people that's what that actually is. They want it for display purposes. But like you go up my wife is a costume designer. And so we're both very artsy people. And people come to our house for social events or whatever. And they'll look around and they're like, oh, who made all this art? I'm like, we don't know. We buy it. We don't hang our own stuff up because that'd be weird. We populate it and it doesn't match. There's no theme, whatever. That's just a weird one to me. But emotional attachment is the only way to sell your art, because when people are looking to purchase something, they have to have a visceral reaction to it, an emotional soul reaction to that art. It has to speak to them. Artists can fall into a trap here, though, because they can present a beautiful piece of art, and then the person who is viewing it wants to buy it. The artist has to let go their preconceived notions as to what that person should feel or think. That's what the artist should feel and think, sure. But as the customer, they can feel and think other things. And you can't be upset if they do not align with what you thought when you created the piece. And I've actually had artists turn customers away because they're like, no, you don't feel about this the way that you should. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, because once it's theirs, they still have that appreciation. It's still something that they love. They just love it for a different reason because everyone's experiences are different. So they're not going to have that same reaction. And so you just kind of have to get over that fact when you're dealing with customers like that. But everything should be an emotional journey, which is why, coming back to the book here, you're selling yourself because it's your journey that they're buying into. Do you know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is?
Of course I do. He is the number one person on my list of people I want to interview. Has been for almost 10 years now.
So he has.
Do you know him?
Quote. Yeah. I don't know. No, I don't know him personally. I wish. Cool dude. But he has this quote that I love for artists. He goes, I am a scientist and I'm a very smart person, because he's Neil deGrasse Tyson. He goes, but I'm not an artist. I can show and tell you things that will blow your mind. But an artist can create something that no person in history and no person in the future will ever create again. And that is a level of magic that I cannot attain, is what he said. As a scientist, he's a very smart man and he's really well known, but he's right in that regard, because our personal experiences dictate how we create the work that we do. And that is what we're selling. We're capturing lightning in a bottle. It's a momentary thing. And so to then tell somebody that they have to feel about lightning the same way you did is off. It's wrong. You just have to let them accept it. But that's why we're so magical, creative people, is that we are able to capture this lightning in a bottle and then present it to other people so that those who don't feel that they can create the art can have that reaction that we do.
Somebody who's been struck by lightning twice is going to have a completely different feeling about lightning as someone who took a beautiful photograph of it and sold it for $10,000 to some collector, right? It's a different emotion. I studied anthropology in college, and the definition of art is that it elicits emotion. If it elicits an emotion, it can be considered art. Again, it's subjective. It elicits different emotions for different people. I want to talk about the Star Wars themed art on the back of my wall. It's three
Sure.
different
Yeah.
pieces, two different artists. These pieces were created from love by independent artists who have nothing to do with Star Wars. And they are Star Wars themed, but you can't really call them Star Wars art because they don't own the IP. So,
Correct.
since you have worked with Disney, who now owns the Star Wars franchise, talk about
Yes.
what artists can do to avoid copyright infringement.
I love this conversation because there is a difference in, and this is United States. I don't know very much about the EU or anywhere else in the world, so I'm going to speak for the United States right here. I've had conversations in other places, but it gets a little bit muddy. But in the United States, there's a difference between copyright and trademark. Copyright is the visual presentation of an object. Okay, it's a theme, it's an idea, it's those type of things. That is copyright. Trademark is an actual text or a very specific image or something that is trademarked within that company. So logos can be trademarked, text can be trademarked. In the United States, trademarks have to be reinforced. They have to be enforced by the person who owns the trademark. So what that means is if, let's say I'm creating some Star Wars art and I've got the word Star Wars, the logo Star Wars on there so that people, my customers are like, hey, that's from Star Wars. What happens is that's a trademark that is owned by Lucasfilms, which is now owned by Disney. So they own that trademark. And if they don't go after you and say, you cannot sell our trademark, that is IP infringement, intellectual property infringement, then they can potentially lose that trademark. Which is why Disney is so rabid about going after fan art because they're using their trademark information. Now, the First Amendment, as long as we still have it, allows us to live within this parody world. Okay, so we can actually parody. That's why places like Saturday Night Live can make fun of things and late night TV show or regular television. That's why we had things called Garbage Pail Kids. But all of these things are copyright. They're not using the actual words. They're just using the imagery. Copyright will not be lost if it is infringed upon. It is up to the owner of the copyright to legally battle whether or not they want their intellectual property used in a way unlike the ways that they had put out there. A great version, I think, is Bill Watterson, the guy who created Calvin and Hobbes. He I don't know if you've ever seen the little decal of Calvin peeing on the whatever logo. Okay, he hates
everywhere.
that. Yeah, he hates it, and he has zero control. He's tried to stop it, but every time he stops one, another one pops up, and he'd have to personally litigate in every single city and state because there's no blanket thing because it's a copyright. And so he's just had to be like, I guess it is what it is. I work with people in the industry long enough that they're like, you're stealing other people's work. How do you feel good about this? And I'm like, I'm not stealing it. It's homage is what I'm doing. I usually just throw this one word out. I go, Halloween. Halloween without copyright law, if everything was treated like trademark, we would not have Halloween. It would be Halloween from the 1930s and 40s where we all just put sacks over our heads with some scary looking faces on it, call it a day. Now they make movies specifically with shots so that cosplayers or people, or Halloween people can actually see how the design is built. The first Wonder Woman movie came out, sitting in the theater with my wife watching that, and she lands and they do a slow pan of the boot and then her arm brace. And my wife's like, that's a really weird shot. I'm like, that's the fan shot. That's for cosplayers.
Yeah.
And it's in 4K. And so because they know it's going to happen and they don't want to shut everyone down because when you start really locking down your IP, then you lose fans.
Yeah.
And so
well, and the fans are what keep you going.
Correct.
Doesn't matter how small of an artist you are. You could just be a local artist who sells local art to local people. And if you've got 10 people who love you, they're going to buy everything you make.
Exactly. And that falls into another rule here, which I would love to talk about. It's not exactly on pricing, but it does help to alleviate people who are new into this or who have been forever.
Is this your 100 rule? Because I was going to, it is on my list.
100 rule.
Let's
talk
about your 100 rule.
So thank you for reading my stuff. So the 100 rule is really simple. Social media has wrecked us. Okay. Anybody who is on social media knows that it's not good for us. But one of the worst things it has done for us is told us that we need to have 1 million likes or a viral video to be successful.
Yeah. Which is BS.
It's a lie. It's a huge lie, but it is a lie that is perpetuated constantly by watching people become super successful with these viral videos. And the amount of people who are like, I can make your videos go viral with this simple hack. It doesn't matter. Think about before social media. And I know a lot of you are too young to know that or whatever. Maybe you're not. But think about before that. When you were in a small town, you would put an ad in the yellow pages. You would put an ad in your local paper. And
the penny paper, the penny saver paper.
Exactly. But if 1 million people showed up at your store, you wouldn't know what to do with that.
No, you wouldn't have enough inventory.
We wouldn't have inventory, but not even
Yeah.
that. Like, how would you work those people through? So why would you
Yeah.
think that one advertisement needs to be a million people liking it for it to be successful? You need 100 people to like it. That's it. That's all you need is 100 likes. And again, it's a mind shift thing. Once you recognize that you don't need 1 million likes, you need 100 likes that convert to sales, then you are successful. You'll never be hungry again. Aim to please those 100 people. Don't aim to please the masses, because a like does not equal $1. You
Hmm.
need to convert this. And so get that out of your mind. So then post on social media. My social media, 200 likes. Great.
That's a
Okay.
lot more than most people.
Correct. How many of those 200 likes turn into businesses? Maybe
Two.
one.
One,
One, two. Yeah.
yeah, one makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not huge, but I don't sit and get upset because I don't have 1 million likes on this. I'm not selling, I'm not here to farm likes. If that's your
Yeah.
job, and create that content because that's what you need to do. But if it's not, I'm here to trying to sell my stuff. I'm not, or myself technically, but the work that I do. And so I just want to appeal to these people. Now you're like, well, how do I find those 100 people? And this is my favorite story to tell, is that your 100 people are out there. We have the internet. So there's 8.3 billion people on this planet. You need 100 of them to be your fans. So I tell this story to people, and when they're like, I can't find my people, I don't know how to do it. The answer is really simple. Be yourself, be honest because you are your favorite customer. You make the art that you want to see. That's why you're making it. So you need to find people who are similar to you. And if you don't think that they're out there, they are. Because here's a great example. I watched a video, I was doom scrolling one day, and I watched this video, and it starts with the guy walks through the doors of a gymnasium, and it is packed full of people, and it's applauding and whatever. And it's a dog show, and there's a guy, and you can see him, he's like doing hand motions, and the dog is flipping and rolling, sitting pretty, and all this stuff. And the crowd is going crazy. Again, packed gymnasium. They start moving the camera closer to the person who's doing the tricks, and you find out that it's not a dog show, it's a person dressed as it. And they're doing animal tricks, but it's a person. And I'm not here to kink shame anybody. I'm like, that's great. But just know they filled a gymnasium, and those people paid to be there. And so that's thousands of people. And if you can fill that doing human dog tricks, you can find 100 people who like what you make. And that's really what it
I'm
comes
like
down to.
trying to wrap my head around that. Okay. Not, I wouldn't pay for that. But
You
again,
wouldn't. No, not your
it
client.
is subjective.
Correct.
It might not elicit the right emotion from me, but
No.
it elicited the right emotion from those thousands of people.
Exactly. And that's why it's a great example, because it's an extreme that not most people, but a lot of people are like, I wouldn't sit in on that. And that's okay. It just shows you that no matter how weird your art is, no matter how weird the object that you create is, or different or out of pocket or very niche or whatever, there's an audience for it. You just have to market to them. And how do you market to them? You don't try to appeal to everybody. You try to appeal to that market.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that when you're starting off is to advertise to yourself.
Yeah.
What would you stop to look at when you're looking at your stuff?
That's one of the hard things that the hard realizations for me, because I want to talk about content creation versus art too, because content creators call themselves creators, and they are creating, but it's not art. So I want to talk about that. But first, I want to talk about me as a content creator who's been doing this for a very long time. I noticed that I consume podcasts that are 20 minutes, and my podcasts are 45. So I have been in a very, very conscientiously trying to make my podcasts shorter, which is a lot of editing. But I'm like, I wouldn't listen to this show. I would not listen to the show, and I am my target audience. So I came to this realization before you just said this sentence. But I've been working on it for, a couple of months now. It's hard because some of these conversations are more than an hour, and I'm paring them down. But it's making me a better interviewer.
And I think that's the key right there. Is say more with less words. I'm really bad at that too. I love to wax poetic. I love to use analogy, which is always going to get me in trouble. The thing is keep in mind, Candace, that when you're editing it down, you're editing for your perfect version of the show, but you may have cut a sentence short or a thought process short that somebody is screaming into their radio or their headphones. What is the rest of that? So it might be worth it for you to release the full version as a secondary, so that if you would like to have the more in-depth version of this, I listen to NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I love that show. I think it's funny, whatever. It keeps me on current
It is
news,
funny.
whatever.
Yeah.
But it is truncated. They cut a lot
Mhm.
of it out. You can go and watch the full thing. If I turn on my radio when NPR is on, then I can listen to the entire thing, and it's a lot longer. Most of the time, I'm not going to, but there's some interviews that I'm like, that was really neat, and I know they cut something out that I would love to know more of, so I can go and dig it up. And I think that might be beneficial for you, so you can have both versions of it, because I think that, granted, it's me as the guest, but I'm like, there's a lot of stuff that I'm saying here that I think is good for people to hear. It may not fit exactly into the tone of a 20-minute truncated show, but I think that you can whet their appetite enough, and if those who specifically want to learn more they can always find it in a long form version.
Well, I'm so glad you brought this up because I now have a community for my podcast listeners. It's called the Gratitude
Yay.
Geek Lab. And this is a thought. I could put the unedited versions as bonus content within the lab. Listener,
Absolutely.
let me know if you want me to do that.
There you
Drop
go.
a comment. You guys know how to get a hold of me. Okay, so let's talk about artistry versus creation. I specifically want to talk about a woman that I know, and I'm going to call her out. She's going to listen to this and she's going to know I'm talking about her, but I'm calling her out. She is a former nun who was arrested for protesting a nuclear power plant. Now she has a blog, and she's very artistic. She's very poetic, and she blogs every day, and she does not consider herself to be a business person. She doesn't think of her blog as a business, but she is definitely a creator, and she has an amazing story. But she doesn't consider herself a creator, and I think she is. She's a poet. She does some art, more crafty art. So talk about artist versus creator.
Okay, so first off, there's a statement I say every time somebody brings this up. Every artist is a creator, but not every creator is an artist. That's the difference. I know a guy who, he works cleaning gutters. That's his job. He's been doing it for 20, 30 years, something like that. I don't know. And he came to me one day because he had an idea, because he was working one day cleaning out the gutters. He's like, there's got to be a better way. And so he developed an idea, and he found an artist who could take his creative idea and turn it into a product for him. This guy never once thought, hey, I'm an artist, I'm going to go and do this or whatever. He's just like, this would help me solve a problem that I have. And that's where most innovation comes from anyways. And so, yeah, we did. We created this product. He launched it. It was great. It did what it needed to do. But would never consider himself an artist. He's just a guy. And so that's why I say every artist is a creative, but not every creative is an artist. And so you have to understand the difference in that definition. Now, I will say to your nun friend who writes this beautiful blog, for 13 years of my 20 years of being Santa for nerds, doing my full-time artwork, I did not refer to myself as an artist. I would call myself anything but. I was an innovator, I was a maker, I was a designer, I was anything but an artist. Until one day an artist friend of mine goes, "Well, you just call yourself an artist. Just call yourself an artist, because that's who you are." And I'm like, So I would walk out into crowds and they're like, "Well, what do you do?" "Well, I'm an artist." And I would get this response every single time. "Oh." And I'm like, I hate that. I hate that. Oh. And it's like I'm an artist. "Oh, you like being poor." Or, "Oh, you couldn't get a real job." And it's like, and even my father-in-law, I've been married for over 25 years now. And my father-in-law just last year told me to go get a real effing job. And I'm like, I make 3 times what your daughter makes. I have a real effing job. Thank you very much. Just because I work in my basement and I enjoy what I do doesn't mean I don't have a real job. And I think that's the difference, is that you have to understand. Like, I didn't want to call myself an artist because I didn't want to be perceived as being something other than what I was. I wanted to be perceived as an expert, as somebody who could be relied upon, who made money, who did all of these things. And what I found in those 13 years is that I was hiding from that. I would never show my face on my work. I would, on social media or anywhere else, I would always just put the product out there and say, "Hey, buy this." And so and I had one guy reach out and he goes, "Is all this mass produced?" And I'm like, "No, I make everything by hand." He goes, "Your pictures are too pretty. They look mass produced. So of course nobody wants to pay you what you're worth because, whatever." And so he gave me the idea of start showing myself in my work, show the process, the messy middle, because that's what people are investing in, not the product. And so once I started calling myself an artist and then really like standing out in front of it, I'm like, my work is great. Don't get me wrong. I do good stuff, but you're buying me in making the thing for you. I've made thousands of pieces all over the world for random people and businesses worldwide, but they're not buying the object. That's the thing that they're purchasing, but they're buying me making it for them. And
Yeah.
that's really what it comes down to. So it's a mind shift. Again, it's a mind shift thing. And I understand from her point of view not to want to be labeled as such. She's a woman of God. She is, a person who has many more interests. She doesn't want to fit into this container. So being a creative, it might be their better way of saying this is what I do. Now, as far as it being a business, I'd fight her on that one because that is a business. And the thing is, what she brings to, okay, so picture this, another analogy, because here I am with all my analogies, but picture this. You go to your real job, and I'm put that in air quotes for those of you who are not watching the video. I go to my real job and I push paper, I do whatever. I've never had a real job, so I don't know what that means. But you go and do this thing in a cubicle, and at the end of the day, you need to unwind. You need to feel human again because you're not a robot. You don't want to work in this machine all the time. You want to be a human being again. And so you get into your car and you turn on your music. And then you go home or you go out and eat and you get a nice meal. And then you watch some television, you read a book, you listen to a podcast, you do whatever. Every single one of those things that make you human again was created by a creative or an artist. Your humanity, which I like to call artists the souls of humanity, rests upon the people who can express things creatively so that we can get our humanity back. That nun who writes these blogs and obviously has a following, otherwise she wouldn't keep writing it. Those people go to her to get their humanity back, to feel creative again, to feel that artistry, to have words expressed that they think or feel, but they don't know how to emote. They don't know how to put into words. That's why greeting cards sell so well. Have you ever gone to get a greeting card and you're like, this is exactly what I was thinking? You're handing it off. It's because they've got a team of creatives sitting there writing weird things out, and then it captures that moment of your heart and makes you human again. And so that's what I would say to her is like, that is a business. That's a sellable art. That's a sellable thing the world over. Your writing makes people human again. Sell it.
Or even just monetize it. I mean, you don't have to sell your poetry if you just want to share it freely, but it's
but that's what
okay
ad
to
spaces
put
are
some
for.
ads on your website. Yeah, just
Absolutely.
pay for your hosting, you know?
Or get a sponsor. If you're a writer and you write in the same type of book every day, and this is what I like to tell creatives, I'm like, what is the thing that you use every single day? Every day that you are the best at using that thing because that's what you're selling. Go to the company that makes it and say, hey, I'd like you to be the sponsor. And they're like, well, what can you offer? It's like, well, I use your product every single day and I can talk to anybody about how to use it. And I'm your expert. I'm a built-in expert. I'm the guy at the grocery store who used to sell knives. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that.
They
But
still
there'd be
do
a guy
that.
who goes, yeah, so I'm going to cut all
I
this. I'm going to
have
show you
those
how sharp
knives and
this
they're
is.
awesome.
We do too. But that's what that is. That's what you are. You are the person who can. So if they don't want to necessarily put up a bunch of banner ads and stuff for random things, find the thing that you do and you use every single day and approach that company. The worst that they can say is no.
Mm-hmm.
The best that they can say is sure, we'll give you some money.
And in 2026, it's really easy to become an affiliate with that product as well and make a little money selling. Not if somebody clicks on the link from your website, you'd make a little money. So that is another option if they say no. You can still, this is my favorite XYZ. This is the one I use all the time. Here's the link to buy it.
Yeah. Even if it's an Amazon affiliate link. I use those all the time.
Yeah.
When I did Twitch for a long time and people would watch me work and they'd say, well, what clay are you using? I'm like, oh, this clay. Here's my Amazon affiliate link. And yeah, you make a few pennies here, but I'm, showing how many people. And then they're constantly buying because they save that link, and then they constantly buy through it and I constantly get a kickback and it's nice. So.
Yeah. So, but you have to do it right. I mean, you just don't throw links and say, hey, buy. You got to do it. You got to do it right.
Sell yourself. My
husband was a world-renowned custom furniture maker. He's retired. He's since retired. Every once in a while, he'll pick up his table saw, but he's basically retired now. And for the first 10 or so years that we were together as business partners, he refused to sign his work. We had 6 employees. We were shipping furniture every week. So there are thousands of pieces of furniture that he made that don't have his name on them. It was later that he started to actually sign the back of the bed. And that was that's a fundamental shift. You go from being a crafter to being an artist when you do that.
You're absolutely right. And I'll admit, I did the same thing because people were hiring me to make, I was playing Santa for Nerds. So people email me and they're like, hey, I would like a Harry Potter themed thing or I'd like a Star Wars themed thing or I'd like a whatever themed thing in a specific use case, like sometimes a proposal, wedding toppers, or just a prop that they wanted. I wouldn't feel like signing it because I was like, well, they're not looking for a Paul Pape. They're looking for a Star Wars. They're looking for a Harry Potter. So I'm going to make it to be as accurate as possible, but my weird signature on that is not part of that thing. So then I was like, but what if, because I do good work. And so what if somebody's like, well, this is official merchandise? I'm like, no, this is custom merchandise and I don't want to get sued anymore. I had enough cease and desist. So what I started doing is hiding my signature into the work. And so I make it now because my logo for Paul Pape Designs is a smiley face. It's my initials, PP and D, and then it looks like a little smiley face. And so I hide that in a lot of my work in places that it's there if I'm looking for it. So I could also be like, yeah, that is one of mine. Cool. Then if somebody steals my design, I can also be like, that's mine. So it's like protection. But it was a big shift for me as well, is to be like, no, they are hiring me. They're hiring Paul to make this thing for them. So it's okay for me to put my signature on it. And it also does protect me and the work that I'm creating. But it is, again, a mind shift. It's owning who you are. It's becoming the wizard who you know you should be to sell your magic items. And when you start signing things, if you're just putting it out there nebulously without signature or anything like that, you're creating objects. You're not creating art. You know, it's a consumable. It's a thing that you purchase, but it lessens the value. Once you start putting your name on there and it becomes associated with you, you become the expert in that area. Then that's what drives your valuation up. It's really hard to keep raising your price when people can't be like, I can't brag that this is yours. People will fight tooth and nail about a Rembrandt that they found, but it doesn't have Rembrandt's signature on it, but they got to go through all this documentation. And because it doesn't have the signature, it's not worth as much. But even a quick doodle with his signature on it is going to be worth more than any print or whatever, because that validates it as being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, you should sign it. And even if it's signed on a place that no one will ever know it's there, that's okay. That's fine. Hide it if you need to. That's okay. But then, when it comes time for someone, let's say you die tomorrow, and then, as all great artists do, you become famous when you're dead, they're going to go back and start looking for those signatures. What is the signature that you're going to put in there? And that's what you should be concentrating on. I don't like to do it loud and proud. It doesn't need to be like right in your face.
It doesn't have to be in your face.
Yeah.
So I've been to the Picasso Museum, and it's not in Madrid, but it's in the Madrid area. And what struck me was the number of unfinished works that were hanging on the walls. And the different, before Picasso did what Picasso's well known for, he actually was
he's a master.
Yeah, he is. His drawings, he's had these half-finished drawings that are hanging on these walls in this museum are incredible. And you can see the transformation of his work. So the signature made those half-finished sketches on white paper or even newspaper worthy of hanging on a wall in a museum dedicated to that single artist.
Yep. It's absolutely true. And I love the fact that to him, I tell this to my wife all the time. She does renderings for all the costumes that she does. And she does, 10, 15 shows a year with 30 to 40 people. So there's hundreds of renderings a year. And she gives them away. And I'm like, why are you giving them away? They're worth so much. And she's like, nobody wants to see the process. Nobody wants to see all like how I came up with it. They just want the clothes on the stage. I'm like, that's not true. The actors who now have them, they send her pictures and they're like, here's my wall with all your renderings of the characters I've been and all that. And it lists her spirits. But your process has value. Like in the Picasso Museum, his unfinished work has value because again, seeing how a great mind comes up with this creative stuff, because again, only Picasso can make Picasso.
Yeah.
Because it's his journey that got him there.
He also had a bunch of people working for him that created his work.
But he had to say, this is how it's done. And he also had to say, that was wrong. That's right, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Same thing with Rembrandt, same thing with all the masters, is they just train people to be exactly like them. But again, at the end of the day, in that museum, those are Picasso's pieces. Whether he made it or not, he oversaw it and all that process, and his name's on it. Jim Bob, who worked for Picasso, is not going to get any credit. And even if his name was on there, Jim Bob would not run nearly as much money as Picasso would. Yeah. So and that's really what it comes down to. So yes, sign your stuff. Make sure that you have you own who you are. And
I want to go back to your wife's renderings. They are invaluable to the actress or the actor that was wearing the clothing in the play, but they're also priceless to that actor's biggest fan. And so that actor could sell that print for more than your wife could.
Probably.
That comes down to elicits emotion and who is the person. But I can totally see someone putting one of those up on one of those auctions, like let's just say that Adrina Menzel or something like that was one of the actresses that wore one of her pieces, and she's doing a fundraiser. So she puts one of these renderings up. I wore this in this play, and somebody buys it for $20,000 in an auction, and the money goes to charity. This goes to the legacy thing, your wife's legacy. So I hope she is signing those.
She signs every single one of them, which is good. And then I take photos of them all because when I want to do her retrospective book, I'm like, I want these renderings. And she's like, well, I've got plenty. And I'm like, no, but you gave away the good one.
Yeah.
Stop giving away the good
yeah.
work.
And you know what? You totally need to publish that book because costume design is an art.
Oh,
It
yes.
isn't. You want to talk about art versus craft? Costume design is an art. Because it does elicit emotion. When you see somebody in a movie or in a play, you don't even notice their costume, but you notice what it does to the scene. It's like when you go to a Shakespeare play and they're all wearing street clothes.
Right. You're like, this is weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Versus when they're wearing the attire, or even if it's themed, even if you're doing Romeo and Juliet and everybody's dressed in 1940s gear and they're, gangsters versus, 15th century Capulet and Montagues, right? They're, it's the costume elicits the emotion and it sucks you in. So
it does.
I want to see I want to see the book. I want the book.
I'm working on it. She just turned 50, so I've got 10 more years before I have to come out with the retrospective. So we're good there. So
you can do it. You can do it then, and then you can do another one later. Okay, well, it's time to wrap up. So, is there anything that you wanted to cover that we have not talked about?
No, I mean we've got the books. I mean, honestly, I could pitch myself, but that's about it.
Well, that's my next question.
Yeah, as far as like just have faith in yourself, be the wizard that you want to be the great adventurer, and then like just own who you are, and then price accordingly. Don't try and chase dragons. Fame and fortune are dragons that are not worth chasing. Stand behind, ride the dragon. What do I say? Ride the dragon of passion, and fame and fortune will fall in line behind you.
I love that quote. So how do people get their hands on your book when it comes out?
Okay, so I have 3 books available currently, which is the Gamify Business books, which actually teach you how to be a creative in a business. It actually teaches you how to write business plans and attack things, but I do it in a fun way. It's playing a game. The game is your game of life, your business, but it's called Gamify Business. You find these at gamifybusiness.com. They're not on Amazon, because I don't want Amazon to take all my money. So gamifybusiness.com, you can get that book. And then I also have the Game Master's Guide to Business, which is a book to tell you how to tell stories, because emotion is what sells art, and the art of storytelling is going to sell you more than the buy me, buy me, buy me world. Then I also have a workbook that goes with this one here. So those are 3 that are available. And then this book here, which is launching on March 27th. We're trying to get a big one. This is available on Amazon. I'm going to let them take that amount of money because I want you to buy these other books from me directly. But this one's called Quit Selling Your Shit. And it'll be available on Amazon on the 27th of March. So
are you taking pre-orders for it?
I am. So you can start getting those pre-orders immediately.
All right, Paul Pape, this is your moment of gratitude. For whom or what are you most grateful?
Honestly, I'm grateful for my wife, but also the life that I lead. They're both tied together because I play every single day. I do not work a day in my life. And what I do, I truly, truly enjoy. And if it wasn't for the support network that I have, including my wife, I would not be able to do these things that I do. So I am utterly grateful for that and the family that I've built around it and just the life that I have.
Thanks for tuning in to Gratitude Geek, the podcast for Gen X women, solopreneurs, building their business, their art on their own terms. Our theme music is by Rep Rock and Solely. To connect with Paul Pape, be sure to check out the show notes at gratitudegeek.com. I've been your host, Candace Rodarty. Stay groovy, my friends.
Stay groovy, my friends.